Howdy, partners. You're listening to Conversations with Jacob, hosted by my good friend, Jacob Waller. Make sure to check out the podcast where podcasts are available and check out the video version on YouTube. You can follow us on social media. Facebook is Conversations with Jacob. Twitter is at CWJ Podcast. And you can visit our website, conversationswithjacobpodcast.weebly.com. Hey, you got a show idea? Maybe a guest suggestion? Email us at conversationswithjacob@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Jacob Waller.
And what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Conversations with Jacob right here on YouTube and where podcasts are available. We got a good episode lined up for you this week, but before we get to our guest this week, I want to make a few podcast plugs. You can check us out on Facebook. Just type in Conversations with Jacob Podcast. Our website is conversationswithjacobpodcast.weebly.com. You can find upcoming guests, past guests, and about a few other things on there. You can also send us an email, conversationswithjacob@gmail.com, and also check out the podcast every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, check out a good friend of mine. His name is Alan Newsom, and he's the host of Two Chairs, No Waiting. It's an Andy Griffin fan podcast. The live shows are every Monday at 8 p.m., and you can visit twochairsnowaiting.com to watch the episodes live every Monday. So with no further ado, let's jump right into my guest this week, and his name is Chuck Hall, and we're going to learn about what he did in the 70s. And so with no further ado, please welcome Chuck Hall to the podcast. Chuck, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, for people who don't know who you are, can you give us a background?
Sure. Well, I'm an author, obviously, a retired therapist. Back in the 1970s, I was in high school in Gunnersville, Alabama, and I wrote a book about some of my experiences with my friends. It's called Tinfoil Aliens, How to Hoax an Alien Invasion, or How to Fake an Alien Invasion. And what I mean by that is that we started off probably about age 11 or 12 of just doing pranks here and there, faking UFOs, and then they got more and more elaborate until we wound up doing the what has been called the Alabama Metal Man or the Alabama Tinfoil Alien. I don't want to say we started the UFO flap. It might have already been going on. I'm not going to say we're single-handedly responsible for the UFO flap in northern Alabama in the 1970s, but we definitely contributed to it. Let's put it that way.
Now, when you was doing these pranks, did you ever get caught?
Depends on what you mean by caught. Not technically caught. The very last one, the metal suit guy, that was one of my buddies who was rather tall. He was like 6'1" when he was 13 years old, and he played basketball in high school. And we didn't technically get caught with that one, but a policeman did take several pictures of him in the costume, and we managed to get away before the cop did anything with it. So that was as close as we ever came to actually being caught.
Now, and why would you wait so long to tell your story? I'm in a book.
Well, number one, afraid of getting caught. Number two, we just kind of forgot about it. We didn't really take it that seriously at the time. We knew that there were some people. The only way that we knew that these hoaxes were having any effect at all was there was a local AM radio talk show, kind of like the 10-cent version of Coast to Coast, if that makes sense. Very few people that actually were able to hear it. There was like 5,000 people in the town, and they were the audience for that. But the point of that is that the only way that we knew that our little hoaxes or pranks were having any effect at all was if we heard it on the radio station or maybe in the local newspaper or something like that. So we didn't really know at the time whether or not we were doing anything. So it wasn't really that big a deal for us at the time. And then later on, we found out that the picture of my friend in the tinfoil suit showed up on a book. I think it was called Beyond Earth was the name of it. And he was actually on the front cover of the book in the outfit. And so apparently one of those photos had made it to that. The second reason is my daughter is big into the paranormal, and I just retired a couple of years ago and had more time to dedicate to my writing. So up until then, I've just been too busy living life to actually sit down and write about it. My daughter, who is into the paranormal, suggested that I write a book about it. So I did. And that's the result here. Just kind of coming clean after, 50 years now?
Now, doing these pranks, was there ever a time where things went wrong during them?
Yeah, multiple times. There are several different varieties of prank that we did. The very last one, the tinfoil alien. Let me tell the story about that. We had been hoaxing for about 2 or 3 years. We had been, just hoaxing things, getting more and more elaborate. We started out with just we used to build model rockets, and then we very quickly discovered that you could create your own fireworks by, instead of putting a parachute in the model rocket for it to return to Earth with, you fill the nose cone full of gunpowder and certain chemicals, and it'll make a big explosion like a 4th of July firework. So that was our first attempt at hoaxing. And then we got more and more elaborate until we finally had built this about 10, 12, 14-foot diameter inflatable UFO with battery-powered LEDs glued all around it. And then we built the tinfoil alien costume, was actually a pattern from Wizard of Oz, the Tin Man. And we made it out of what they used to call them space blankets back in the day. Now they're just called mylar blankets. They're just those silver blankets that they use for emergencies where people have hypothermia and they want to keep them warm. If you've ever been camping, you might have one of those. So we made a costume out of that. And then we had our little UFO, the 14-foot inflatable UFO. And we went out looking for places to hoax. And we found a field out in, turned out later to be, I think it was Fife, Alabama. We didn't know where it was at the time because it was out in the middle of nowhere, which was what we were looking for, someplace out in the middle of nowhere. And so we had the balloon UFO on a kite string. We let it up, let it fly around a while, turned on the LED lights, let them flash around. And then my friend in the metal outfit got out and ran around in the field. And that's when the cop showed up. So that's pretty much about as wrong as it can go. And the cop took a few pictures of him first, and then he flipped on the lights. We didn't even know he was a cop. At first, we just thought he was off duty when he got called in. So he drove his truck out there and started taking Polaroid pictures of the guy in the outfit. We'll just call him Ken. That's not his real name, but I want to protect his identity because I haven't told him that I'm telling all this. But the cop showed up and turned on the flashing lights after he had taken some pictures. And that's when we all started panicking. And so Ken started running. We were in a van, so he started running back to the van. We all got in the van and ran away. And the cop started chasing us. I don't know if he saw the van or not. He started chasing Ken in the outfit. And he broke an axle driving across. He was in the middle of a field. I don't know if you've ever been in the middle of a farm field, but trying to drive a vehicle through that is not exactly a good time. So he broke his axle trying to chase us down. And so we got away from the cops that way. But yeah, that was pretty much about as bad as it could go wrong.
Now, have you ever had any paranormal encounters?
Yeah, there's one in the book where I talk about well, let me explain the book. The first part of the book is about us hoaxing a bunch of UFOs. The second part of the book is how to tell a hoax from the real thing. And one of those one part of this is that there's something that's unexplained that doesn't automatically mean it's aliens from outer space. Doesn't mean it's not, but it doesn't mean it is too, unless you have, actual, some sort of actual hard evidence that it is aliens from outer space. So I tell one of my particular paranormal experiences in the book, in one of the final chapters. My daughter and I were coming home from an event one night, and it was dark. There was a full moon. Well, I don't think it was full. It might have been. Well, anyway, the phase of the moon doesn't really matter. But we just were looking at the sky, and noticed that there was a patch over there that we couldn't see the stars in. And then as we kept looking at it, the patch started moving. So, okay, what is this? It's this big black spot in the sky. And then it started moving over the car. And as it started crossing the road where we were driving by, the lights came on. And it was one of those big black triangle UFOs. And if I had to guess, I would say it was probably about 600 feet. And it was maybe 100 feet off the ground right over us. And then it flew across the road and into the field. And we pulled off the side of the road to see if it was going to land. At this point, we didn't know what it was. We were just kind of curious. And it looked like it was going to land. It got, maybe within 50 feet of the ground, and it was huge. It was gigantic. And you could see the lights reflecting on the ground from the ship or whatever it was. And then just when we thought it was going to land, it just pointed up and took off faster than anything I've ever seen in my life. It was not. And I used to live in Pensacola, so I've seen, F-14 jets take off as fast as they can. So I know how fast military hardware can move. It was way faster than any of that. But it was also silent, and there was no sonic boom or anything. So the point to all that is that this was something that could not be explained. I don't know. And this was 1992, 93, maybe. I don't remember the exact date. But the point to all that is that it could not be explained by anything that we would know about. It could have been some sort of military project, or it could have been aliens. It could have been a military project from another country, and they were spying on us. But to this day, I've never found a satisfactory explanation of what this might have been.
Now, moving on to a next topic here. Do you believe in the psychics and the mediums?
Well, I like to say that belief exists on a spectrum. A lot of people say you either do believe in this or you don't believe in it. And that's not necessarily true. There's two ends of the spectrum. And what I mean by that, on the far extreme end on one side is I absolutely refuse to believe in this no matter how much evidence you show me. And on the other side of the spectrum is I'm absolutely going to believe in this no matter how much evidence to the contrary you show me. So most people are somewhere in the middle. They're not on either extreme. And I'm usually in the middle on a lot of this stuff. Psychic phenomena, I would say that there's some evidence to support it, and there's some evidence that doesn't support it. I'm kind of in the middle on that. I would like to believe it. I've had my own experiences. I don't know if you call them psychic, but precognition experiences where I would dream something and then it would happen later. So it is possible that something like that is going on. However, I can't say conclusively that that's something that's actually happening, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
So I would like to believe it. I do have my own experiences. There are other possible explanations, but the other possible explanations don't feel right, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now, going back to aliens here, do you think that I don't know, do you think that the government knows about these aliens?
Again, that would be, it's possible that they know about them. It's possible that they don't exist. Everybody has their own standards of evidence for what would be deemed credible. In other words, what I think would be credible evidence of aliens might not be what you think would be credible evidence of aliens. And what we both think would be credible evidence might not be for someone else. I can't prove to the scientific community that there's any kind of alien presence on Earth or any sort of aliens coming to visit us. On the other hand, there's a lot of people that have seen them. So if there are no alien visitations, then what else is going on that makes all these people say that they saw them? See what I'm saying there?
Oh
So
yeah.
uh, there's a thing called the Fermi paradox, and the Fermi paradox says if you think about all the stars, there's 100 billion or 200 billion stars in our galaxy alone. And when I was born, we didn't know of any other planets outside of our solar system. I think there's now like 5,000 outside of our solar system that we know about. And it looks like pretty much every star out there has a planet, at least one planet. So if only a small portion of those have Earth-like planets where intelligent life can evolve, then if you start thinking about 200 billion, if 1 in a billion planets has, or 1 in a billion stars has a planet that intelligent life could evolve on, then that's still 200 intelligent civilizations in our galaxy alone. So the odds are pretty good that there should be intelligent life out there. What the Fermi paradox is if there's all these planets out there, where is everybody? One answer to that might be that we're alone in the universe. Another answer to that might be that they're already visiting us and the government's covering it up. Another answer might be that they just haven't gotten to see us yet. So there's all sorts of proposed solutions to the Fermi paradox. I like to believe that there's some aliens out there somewhere.
Well, that kind of goes into my next question. And do you think that there's life on other planets?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Now, what the odds are overwhelming in favor of that. Like I said, if there's only 1 in a billion chances of life for every star, then that means there's at least 200 in our galaxy alone. And if you think about all the stars in the known universe, there are more stars in the known universe than there are grains of sand on every beach on Earth. And that's a lot of sand. So if 1 in a trillion of those had a planet capable of sustaining life, then we're still talking about trillions and trillions of planets capable of sustaining life. So yeah, definitely. Now there's a difference between believing in the possibility and coming out and saying definitely, absolutely aliens exist. But yeah, I believe that the odds are extremely good that there are aliens out there.
Yeah, before we went on the air today, I got like a news story on my phone that talked about UFOs. There was a UFO sighting in Colorado, and it was spotted by 12 people, and they said it was like a circular disc shaped, and it disappeared about 10 feet, about at 1 a.m. So I don't know if it really happened or if somebody actually saw something.
And that's one of the things in the book. I have 10 steps in there. I won't go over all of those, but there's a chapter in there on how do you tell if something is real or not. I have personal experience in how easy it is to fake a flying saucer or a UFO. And so it's real easy to fake something. On the other hand, there could be something visiting the Earth. And I'm not saying that it's not, but just saying that the chances are, if you go through this list of things that are common with hoaxes and then check off all of those and none of those are ringing a bell, then you might have a UFO there. And I always tell people, sometimes they call them UFOs and sometimes they call them UAPs, but remember what the letter U stands for. It stands for unidentified. So unless the aliens get out and shake your hand and say, here's a map to our homeworld, was it an alien or was it something you just don't know what it was? So if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. Now, do you kind of say the same thing for the paranormal encounters? Not just UFOs.
Yeah, and that goes back to that belief spectrum. How much evidence would be necessary to convince you? So if it's a ghost encounter or a psychic phenomenon or a cryptid or anything like that. I live in Bigfoot country. We went Bigfoot hunting for Father's Day this year. And so there's each thing, the more extraordinary the paranormal claim gets to be, then the more evidence you're going to need. I forgot who said it, but extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. So if I'm saying something like a Bigfoot, there were animals back a million years ago, or I don't remember the exact, but way back in prehistoric times, there was an animal called Gigantopithecus, and it was a 10-foot tall ape that they still haven't decided whether or not it walked upright. So we know something like that definitely existed. So Bigfoot could be a descendant of that particular creature. And that wouldn't be too big of a stretch, because we already know that such creatures existed, to say, well, maybe there's some of them that survived and they live in the woods in the Pacific Northwest and they're hanging out at coffee shops in Seattle, that sort of thing. Or on the other hand, then we have, okay, this big giant metal man in a tinfoil outfit was running around in a field in northeastern Alabama in the 70s. That's a little more of an extraordinary claim. And so we're going to need a little more evidence to say that that was a real alien and not just somebody running around in a tinfoil suit, if that makes sense. So that depends on each one of them has a certain criteria that it would have to push that credibility bar a little closer to the believable side, if that makes sense.
Now, how you mentioned that you went Bigfoot hunting, so did you experience anything?
Heard some sounds out in the woods. Don't know if it was a Bigfoot or a bear or somebody else yelling out in the woods trying to make us think it was a Bigfoot. So don't really know for sure. We did get to talk to, it's called the Bigfoot Interpretive Center of Mount St. Helens. And there's a guy there named Joseph. He's a very helpful individual. If you're ever in the area around Mount St. Helens, he will give you more information than you know what to do with about Bigfoot. They go out and hunt them routinely. They have recordings. He has a whole case there in the store full of Bigfoot footprint castings. And so they have a lot of that stuff there if you're interested in that sort of thing.
Now, going back to Bigfoot, and have you seen the Patterson film? And so, and what is your opinions on that?
Yeah, I haven't talked about that in that particular book, but I'm working on a book. My next book is going to be about Bigfoot.
Oh.
And it's tentatively called Bigfoot is my spirit animal, but I haven't decided if I'm going to go with that yet or not. But the Patterson Gimlin film, that has been pretty much debunked. There was a guy who ran a costume shop in North Carolina who came out and said that he's the one that made the costume. And then he explained in great detail how he made the costume and how he told the people to try it out. There was, I can't remember the guy's name now. I'm drawing a blank. But the guy that was actually in the suit, he has come out and said that he was the one that was in the suit. And just prior to them making that film, Patterson was working on a Bigfoot documentary. It was going to be a docudrama where he was going to create this. Well, let me back up a little bit. I don't know if you're familiar with The Legend of Boggy Creek. Have you ever seen that movie, that film?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, I think so.
It came out in the early 70s, about the same time that we were doing all this UFO stuff. And we watched that as well. And we were expecting it to be like real footage of a real Bigfoot or a real series of Bigfoots. And what it was a guy in a Bigfoot costume, and they just told stories about people who had seen Bigfoot, and then they reenacted them with this guy in the Bigfoot costume. So it wasn't an actual Bigfoot. So Patterson and Gimlin were going to do the same thing. They were going to make their own movie. It's documented that they went to Hollywood and talked to several prop houses there and talked to several movie producers to try to get them to be interested in making the movie. And then shortly thereafter, they bought a Bigfoot costume from this guy in North Carolina. And then shortly after that, that's when the Bigfoot film was made. So all of that just seems to be a little too much coincidence, if you know what I mean. That they buy a Bigfoot costume and then they just coincidentally happen to see a Bigfoot a couple of weeks later. But there's all this is backed up by a testimony from people, from the guy that owns the costume, from the guy who bought the costume, from the guy who made the costume, from the guy who was in the costume. And so yeah, I think that one's kind of been pretty much debunked. Now there are some other ones that are a little more credible right now, and I can't think of any of the. I have a YouTube channel called Conspiracy Chronicles, and I've put those on that footage on that site. But the Patterson Gimlin, I'm not convinced anymore about that because I've seen too much stuff. Gimlin actually lives in Yakima, Washington, which is maybe 2.5 hours from where I am. So he still does circuit lectures about it. So he's still making money off of it.
About that. Now for people who get your book, and what do you expect them to take away from it?
Well, number one, people just assume that because it's about how to fake a UFO, that it means that I automatically am not going to believe in UFOs no matter what anybody says. That's not true. What the point of writing the book was just, this is how you can tell if it's a hoax or not. And if you can't prove that it's not a hoax, that doesn't automatically mean that it's aliens, but it also is a better chance of it being aliens than if it's some guy in a tinfoil suit or somebody with a balloon. So the other part of that is that whole idea that belief is on a spectrum. What I believe might be different from what you believe. If you're going to convince me, then you have to have evidence that convinces me, not evidence that convinces you, if that makes sense. And part of the whole idea behind all of that is, I don't know if you guys remember the Heaven's Gate cult. Heaven's Gate happened 90s, I think it was. That was a UFO cult that had convinced themselves that there was a comet that had a UFO hidden in the tail. And if they committed suicide at the right time, their souls would go up to the UFO and then they would go off to paradise. So if you're willing to believe things that you fall for things like that, then you can see the danger of not having enough evidence to believe what you believe, if that makes sense. The way I put it is that you proportion your belief to the amount of evidence available. And that doesn't mean that it's not UFOs or it's not aliens. It just means I'm going to put a pin in this until I get more evidence, so that people don't get taken in by people who are trying to make money off of UFOs, or people who are even more dangerous are going to get you to commit suicide so the flying saucer can take you off to paradise or whatever. So there's a thin line there between what's believable and what's knowable.
Now, and where can people get your book?
It's available at most of the major media outlets. It's Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Just go to Amazon if you want and look for Tinfoil Aliens by Chuck Hall. Or you can go to my website. I have a website. It's chuckhallonline.com. And I also have a blog there where I write about paranormal topics.
All right. Before we wrap up this podcast, I would like to ask my guests at the end of every episode, have they got a closing thought? So do you got a closing thought for the people listening?
Yeah, the closing thought would just be that um, I always make a line between what I believe and what I can prove to be true. So I consider myself a hopeful skeptic. What I mean by that is that I love to believe in aliens. I'd be the first one there if I could. If they landed on the White House lawn and said, "Take me to your leader," I'd love to be there and meet them. Um, on the other hand, if I don't have the evidence to convince someone, then I shouldn't expect them to be convinced. If the evidence isn't good enough for them, then I shouldn't get upset if they don't believe me, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Oh well, Chuck, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast once again, and it's
Sure.
been a pleasure. And it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I've had a good time. Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, that wraps it up this week for Conversations with Jacob. Tune in next week for another interview. Until then, God bless, and we'll catch you next week.